I would like to show everyone a good example of working with layers in both Photoshop and in Flexi. And this, I hope, will help you see the difference in these two programs and how you can actually use them in some special ways as well if you want to protect those layers. So I went online and I found this particular calendar that I thought looked pretty cool. And if you scroll down on this page, you actually can see they'll actually allow you to download each of the parts of the image or the image completely. So if you just needed the PNG file with a transparent background, piece of cake. But if you want all the parts of the image, they actually provide the PSD file, which is the Photoshop file. And again, this has all the parts in here. These are the parts that they used and created different formats to put together to create this particular piece of art. So it looks like this right here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download the PSD file. That's the Photoshop file, okay? So I've done that already. And so let's take a look in Photoshop and see what it looks like. All right, so I've opened that PSD file in here, and you can see it's a fairly large document. And on the right-hand side over here, I have my layer manager open. And in Photoshop and in some of the other Adobe products and so forth, each of these pieces have been put together in a layer in order to order them from front to back. So that's one thing that layering is going to do in Photoshop. And then they also maybe add some effects on some of these layers. So for instance, in this particular layer, let's see what that is. That's the actual lettering down there on the bottom, right? So one of the effects that they have in here is a stroke, apparently, around that particular layer. They're doing that. So that's fine. So what you can do, obviously, if you're a Photoshop user, is you can turn on and off parts, right? So if I go in here and I just turn off and on these parts, it's, you know, you can actually turn them on and off, and you can manage those. That's kind of how the Adobe mindset uses to create this artwork. Okay, so say now I want to take this into my Flexi product, and I want to actually work with it, and I want these layers, but I want to be able to work with them, maybe do some other things to them, whatever. Okay, I have some choices. I can actually go to my file here, and I can click Save As, and it will give me some options to save this graphic in a number of different formats, right? So the first format, obviously, is the Photoshop format. And you notice it says, you know, I've got what I have turned on. If I don't turn on one of these layers, doesn't mean it doesn't import it, but it's not going to show. So layers is checked, so I'm saving this with layers. I'm embedding this profile in here, and I'm saving it as a PSD file. So I did one like that. And then what I did was I went through each of these formats to see if there was a format that Flexi could read, and I know it doesn't read this PSB file, that included the layers, right? So as I go through here, you'll see these layers are not included, which means it flattens the file, right? So for instance, if I save it as a JPEG file, you're not going to import these layers. It's just going to be a flat file. And then it does whatever, Photoshop does whatever it needs with its export filters to create this, you know, image, right? And sometimes that's all we need. So many of us just use JPEG files. That's no problem. Again, PNG file, you know, maybe want to preserve the transparency in this. So that's what many use, a PNG file. So I'm also going to save this in two other formats, okay? I'm going to save it, let's see, where am I? I'm going to save this as a PDF file because that also includes layers. And I've already done that. And then I'm also going to save it as this TIFF format. You may not realize, but TIFFs can have transparencies, and you can actually save it with layers. So I've done that as well. Okay, so at this point, since I've saved those particular formats, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on over to the Flexi product, and let's open those three file formats, and let's take a look at how Flexi treats it. Now what I've done in Flexi is I've actually gone here and I've turned on the design editor. That's the layer manager for Flexi, and it also has object manager, so it would handle like each individual part. So the objects tab is really more like layers in your Photoshop. Okay, so the layers here is just where those items are placed, and then this tab actually shows you. So like for instance on layer 1 right now, which is open, that's the layer I'm in, right? There's nothing in here yet. It's just a blank page. All right, so I'm going to leave that up. So the first thing I'm going to do on layer 1, okay, I'm just going to go to my file menu and I'm going to go to import. I'm going to go to my files over here and we're just going to open the PSD file. Okay, so let's import that. I'm going to import. So you can open the PSD. There's the PSD file right there. Okay, and let's go on over to our layer manager here and let's just rename our layer. Okay, let's name this layer PSD format. Okay, so we know what we're working with there. No problem, right? Now you notice when I double click on that name, that's how I renamed it, and you can actually turn on and off what you want to be able to do with this particular piece. That's another interesting thing, right? By the way, this red here, that's the selector and outline there. All right, so that's one that we've imported. Okay, let's go ahead and click on that, and we're going to go over here to make sure you're on that layer. All right, we'll go to that layer. I'm going to go to my objects, and you'll notice I don't see a lot of things here. All I see is this is it imported it, but it imported it as a transparent bitmap. And what is that? Okay, well, if I click on my image here and I go to my Design Central and I go to my third tab here, it says it's pretty good resolution, 300 pixels per inch. It's a pretty large file, 11 by 16, so it probably print very well. It just simply has a transparent image here. And what does that mean? That simply means if I were to draw something, say like something like this, and move it over here, right behind those leaves, and I go right click and I move that to the back, it's transparent in there. See? So in other words, the image is actually transparent. See how you can see it underneath all those items? So this white area here is actually transparent. That's all that means. And notice over here in my objects tab, see the rectangles underneath? That's basically what order does, right? All right, so let's get rid of that. All right, what we're going to do now is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to actually come in and say I want to create a new layer. So now I have another layer I'm going to work on. I'm no longer on this layer right here. And let's go in here and we're going to import. And this time we're actually going to pick the tiger that was the TIFF file, okay, with all the layers turned on. So here you can see a preview. I'm going to import it and I'll put it right next to this image. Now it says open as a single layer. If I say yes, it flattens everything. So I'm going to say no to this. Why am I doing that? Well, you'll see in just a second. Now, this actually has all of the layers that it had back in Photoshop. So for instance, if I go back to my Photoshop, even though I had this layer turned off, right? Or let's say this one here, that's more obvious, right? Even though I have that don't look at it here, what the transparent TIFF file did was I imported all of the layers. That's what that message was in Flexi. So it imported everything and turned them all on. So if I go back to my Flexi now, they're all turned on. Okay, so what do I need to do here? I have a couple of choices. First of all, let's take a look at this layer here. Let's rename our layer TIFF format, right? So we know what it is, right? Okay, and I'm going to go to my objects, and you can see here's my object that was on that layer. This is now my TIFF format, and look, there's a little plus here, and these are all objects. These actually correspond to the layers over here. All of these layers in here correspond, right, to the Objects tab, and here is all of this. Now, it didn't keep the name. That's typical of a lot of programs, right? So let's do this. I'm not going to select anything, and I'm going to click on this bottom one around here, right? So if I were to move that, you'll see that's one of the layers, right? That was the tiger layer in there. So I want to keep that. See what I'm doing here? And I'm going to start going up here. Here's the next layer. See this layer right here? What is that? That's the background. I want to keep that, so I'm going to undo that. See what I'm doing? And I'm just clicking on these layers until I see something that might not be what I want. This is the 2022 layer. Now, I could double click on that if I wanted to. That little image right there, just double click on it and rename it, right? You can rename the layer if you want to, okay? I mean that object. So that's all possible to do as well. All right, I'm going to go to the next one up. This is another transparent bitmap, which makes sense, right? What is that one? Let's pull that down. That seems to be some sort of background or something like that. So let's leave that alone. All right, let's go up one more. Go into this one now. Let's pull that down and see what that is. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to zoom in like this because I want to show you that particular layer looks right. That looks like what I'm trying to, the flattened layer over here. So I'm going to keep that one right there. Okay, so let's undo that. And I'll just go up here closer down. So let's see. I went to 298 this time. Okay, let's pull that down. Okay, that's another language thing. I don't need that. So go ahead and press delete and delete it. All right, let's go up here to 301. Now this is just a fancier lettering or whatever. If I want to, I could keep that and not do the other one. I'm not. I'm gonna delete that. So again, you can go in here and start looking. You can see there's plenty of different calendar options. Basically, is what this guy's giving you here. This is another language. Okay, I don't want that one. Yeah, I'm gonna look at this guy. You see what I'm doing here? I know this is a little bit of a chore, but it's definitely a way to start looking at things. And now I notice that these are starting to look the same now, aren't they? So what's this layer right here? That's probably, let's magnify everything. Okay, that's the big border. I want to keep that. And this layer right here is probably some kind of, that's the message in here. I don't want that, right? So let's get rid of that. And now, if you'll notice these two images actually are identical, with the exception that the first one, which was the PSD format, right? That first one only had the transparent bitmap. And there's really nothing I can do with the individual parts of that. The TIFF format had all of the parts that put together make this image over here. And you can still manipulate those. You could, in fact, move them into other layers and match the layering system that you had back in Photoshop. That's another thing you could do. Okay, so let's go one step further. Let's just move that over. Let's go over here in the File menu, and we're going to import. And what we're going to do at this point is we're going to take that PDF file that we made. Remember, there was a PDF file there? There it is, right there. Let's import that one. All right, let's see if we get any messages from Flexi. There's no messages, right? So I'm going to click on this, and that looks identical to the previous ones. Now this particular one, I accidentally put it on this PSD layer here, right? And it was this bitmap right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and create a new layer again. And I'm just going to call this PDF. Whoop. Looks like I made too many layers there. It's no problem. We can just trash that one. No problem. Just take that off there, you know, and just say I don't want it. So get rid of it. Or we can leave it. It doesn't really matter. Oh, here it is right here. I'll trash that. There we go. So here's my layer one. So I'm going to rename that PDF format. Okay. There's my PDF format. And I'm going to take this one that was my PDF format this time, and I'm just going to move it. And all you got to do is just click on it, and just move it over to the other layer if you want. So I have these on 3 separate layers now. I have 3 different projects. They look identical. They act identical. You know, they're all transparent backgrounds. I'll prove it. All right, I'm going to draw a big old rectangle here. Okay, nice, great big rectangle. There we go. I'm going to click on the rectangle and say move that to the back. And I'm going to pull it down over the images here, and you'll see what's it doing. It's behind that one. It's behind that one. Why? Because it's here in my layering system. Why isn't it behind this one? Because it would have to go all the way to the bottom here. So you would have to drag this and say, I want to move that down here. See? This is the advantage. This is how you use this Objects tab here. All right, so now it's identical. All 3 of those images are exactly the same, right? They're exactly the same. I'm going to get rid of my rectangle. Oops, that's all right. We can just click on it. There we go, and delete it. All right. Now I'm going to go to my layer manager here, and this is where now I can actually turn off, like I want to turn off my PSD version, I want to turn off my PDF version, and I just want to use my TIFF version. They're identical, but the reason I wanted to use my TIFF format was maybe because I want to come in here and do something with these, like reorder them, or you know, maybe I want to add to this particular layer. You know, maybe I want to add some text in there, right, or something like that. So I make sure that I'm on that layer, and if I were to come in here and click on the screen and type in some lettering. All right, and let's change the just make it a little thicker maybe. Okay, oops, gotta select it, make that a little bit thicker. That's all cool. All right, let's move this little dude over. We're just going to put it over on our bitmap here. All right, I'll make it a little bit bigger like this. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to say send that to the back. Am I helping you here? I hope I am. You know, this is pretty cool, right? I've clicked off on that, and if I'm having trouble selecting the word Muto, see how it's selecting everything else? I go to my Objects tab, I come in here and I say, oh, that's the one I want right there. Because maybe I want to change the color of that. Isn't that not cool? So, you know, if you're going to work with images coming from Photoshop and you want to kind of maintain that layering system, or for that matter from any program that does layering, what I suggest is saving it as a TIFF file and make sure that they have that check mark for the layers turned on, right? So in other words, if I'm going to save this as a format to use in my Flexi, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say save as, and I'm going to look at my options that I have here, right? And the one that I know works really well is this TIFF format. And just make sure that layers is ticked, and it will import every single layer you have over here in the order of those layers. It won't name them correctly. You know, these are some improvements that I hope the boys over and girls over at SAI will look. I'm going to send them this video so they can see it too. But this is how the layers work, and this is why you can still use that system right inside Flexi as long as you understand Design Editor and you understand what layering and objects are all about. This is Mark Rugen with Muto. I have tons of videos just like this one at muto.thinkific.com. I would love for you to go there right now and investigate. I've got an entire learning system just for Flexi. So that website again, I'll type it out for you. It is http no www, just muto.thinkific.com. How about going over there right now and watching some of the other stuff I've got? I know you're going to enjoy it. Thank you for your attention and time today.